Hi, Dr. Jen here, and we are going to talk about documenting and recording information. While often we think of this as a tool we use with younger students, you can use it all the way through university level. After watching this video, you'll be able to identify ways to use informal observation techniques in the classroom, checklists, anecdotal notes, photos, videos, etc. Whenever you are thinking about documenting information, you want to start from the why. Why are you gathering this information? What's the purpose? What is it you want to know? When can you gather this information? How are you going to pull it together to figure out what's really going on and interpret it? The most important part is anytime you're gathering assessment data is how you can use it to support student learning. There are different types of recording procedures. There are procedures that describe, like descriptive narratives, anecdotal notes, jottings, diagrams, sketches, photographs, audio and video recordings. There are procedures that count, like participation charts and frequency counts. And then there are also procedures that rank, like rating scales and rubrics. So from the article y'all read, you got to see a comparison of different types here. So you can have like a description standing in front of the class. This child said in a loud voice, I should point to each word in her journal, my friend Jana. And then you could do things like a count or a tally, how often she did something. So she reads a dictated story. And then you could also rate it on confidence, how she feels about writing, how she feels about reading. So the same piece of data can be quantified in different ways. So descriptive and narrative records are longer, they include more detail. It's to document longer events. It's like a video recording with a continuous record of everything that's said or done during an event, and it may include the behaviors or activities of an individual or multiple children. Typically, this type of narrative event, the only time you would record something like this is if you were trying to gather data on a particular child to try and figure out what was going on. So this is a running record of everything that happened. You keep the what happened separate from the interpretation of what happened. So you want to make sure that that interpretation piece is kept separate from the list of what happened. So that you're keeping them apart. Anecdotal notes are shorter than a descriptive or narrative record, but they're longer than jottings. Now, I use the terms anecdotal notes and jottings kind of interchangeably. I typically call anytime I take a quick note an anecdotal note, but technically they're a little bit longer than jottings. They are short, they are focused, and they're a narrative account of a specific event, and they can document the behavior of or skills of a child or small group of children. So again, longer writing down exactly what happened and trying to capture what happened in a specific period of time. Again, not super useful, too long for like regular classroom things. This is the type of thing you would capture if you had a specific concern about a child, or if you were like gathering data for parent-teacher conferences in a preschool classroom. Jottings are what you do most frequently. They're the shortest length, short notes about significant characteristics. It's important to preserve details by using phrases and abbreviations and taking shortcuts. And these can be comments or notes as part of like a checklist, a participation chart, or another form of data. And then it can also be used to capture group data. So when you're using jottings, you're trying to capture their counting skills. So you've got a chart that you've created with rote, meaningful, and notes. And so you're asking children to count. And so the first child had no errors to 5, and then they needed to be prompted. And then you capture it the next time and gather more data. So you're trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. You're writing notes to keep track of that. Now I've got some examples from my real classrooms. So this is from my first grade classroom in the Bronx. So I wrote down what was happening during a small group literacy lesson. So I wanted to pay attention to what errors they were making, what words they could read independently. That EIH is easy, instructional, or hard. So I can capture if this text was the appropriate level of challenge. And so this is a time that teachers often take anecdotal notes during small group time because you can have your chart and table ready to go. You can write down exactly what the child did. Now, these are examples of the types of notes I would take when students were at their centers. So they are engaged in the reading center, and what were they doing, how did it work, etc. This gives me information about choices they make, who they're interacting with, if they're working independently or not, and then I would take these at the end of the day and pop them in each child's folder. You can also do this digitally now. The other way I did this was I had sticky notes all over my classroom so that then I could stick them on the students' pages in my portfolios so that I could remember. So like this would be where everything was all mixed up. I'd capture the dates, I'd capture what they did, and what I wanted to do with them next. So for example, for James, he was playing a game. I wrote down the name of the game. I wrote down which numbers, what he actually said. So he said 12, 13, 15, and then I made myself a note that I wanted to work on getting him to say 13, 14, 15. Jillian was reading, and I captured that she read the word like without help, and that was probably a word we were targeting at the time. Narrative records have the ability to capture any type of information. The length can be very varied, and then written accounts preserve the context and the sequence of events, but it can take more time. It can detract from what you're doing with the other students, and then recording after the event may be unreliable. When you're doing it, make sure that you write down exactly what you hear or see in the order that it happens. Record the event as it is happening if it's really important. Capture all the necessary information so that you can remember. Write down what the child actually says rather than paraphrasing if that's important. And then making sure to separate the feelings from the actual, your feelings and your interpretation from what you've written down. Separate those inferences so that you keep the facts separate from your interpretation. There are lots of visual ways to capture students' understanding. At this point, the text goes through diagrams and sketches, but in reality, even 20 years ago in my kindergarten classroom, we just took photos of things we wanted to make sure we captured. So you can draw pictures and then take notes. You can write anecdotal notes on things that the children have done where they've drawn the pictures. And then you can also take a photo and then take notes about what the child said about what was occurring in the photo. This is really powerful for families. It captures something that happened in the classroom and lets them see exactly what their children is able to do with or without support. And then it doesn't take a lot of time because you just take a quick photo, but often you need that interpretation to explain the context and what else was going on at that time. Take a moment to write an example of something you could capture with an anecdotal note, a jotting, a photograph, or a diagram, and explain why it would be a good way to capture that. Now, audio and video records are great ways to get evidence of what students are capable of doing. Seesaw is a fantastic digital portfolio tool where you can actually capture children reading a text so that you have beginning, middle, and end of year examples of their reading, and they can be really powerful. Make sure that you're focusing on a specific assessment situation, place them so that it's unobtrusive, and you'll learn more about this in your reading assessment course. Again, you get all of the information, all of the detail, but it can be a lot to keep track of. So make sure that you're targeting things that are really important and that you are focusing on things that are going to give you the most bang for your buck. They're great tools to use when you have parent-teacher conferences or family conferences. Procedures that count are where you tally or count the number of times that something occurs. The behaviors when you're doing this have to be mutually exclusive. Checklists are practical and versatile ways to document many behaviors and skills. They can originate from standards, learning objectives, or developmental sequences. So here you are working on relative size and terms. And so you've got all of these different terms you're looking for, and then you can do a check or plus to capture what they're able to do. And it's a quick way to get them a lot of information in a brief amount of time. You're just checking in with your kiddos when you have a few extra minutes, and you can keep track of it all in one single checklist. You can also code it where a 4 is independently without hesitation, a 3 is independently, a 2, they need minimal support, a 1, they need lots of support, and a 0, they could not complete it. Again, a quick way to see how everybody is doing in the class and capture and see trends in the data. Participation charts can record the quantity and quality of participation. It highlights participation rates and provides insights into children's preferences, dispositions, and patterns of participation. So you can tally every 15 minutes to see where students are in the classroom, to see if students are spending too much time in one center, or if you want to encourage them to see other centers. You can also use these for concepts about print, where you have an individual checklist where they do different things and you have that space to take notes. Take a second and look at this participation chart. What do you notice? Who is participating? Who isn't? Look at gender and location. The front of the room is where the text is. This is another example of a participation chart, and this is where the children actually kept track of their own participation and what it was that they studied. And this participation chart is looking at how students were doing in a cooperative learning task. A 1 is for a relevant contribution, a 0 is for a irrelevant contribution, and then if there's blank, it means that they didn't participate. Checklists are fantastic. They're quick, they're easy. You can get all of your data in one place. It can track children's progress across time, and other adults can easily use checklists in your classroom. Sometimes they oversimplify complex behaviors, or they may not be representative enough, so you have to interpret them cautiously. Participation charts are a simple, easy way to see who's participating and how frequently. Children can report on their own participation. Other people can do this for you. It may not reflect how much a child is learning. Some children are quieter, some are louder. It just gives you a snapshot into who's verbally participating in the classroom. Frequency counts gather data on specific behaviors. It can be used for social initiation, responding to others, aggression, disruptive behavior, etc. So this is the number of times a child hurt another child. And so this is the type of thing you would do if you're having behavioral problems. You can do the same thing to document positive behaviors, but if you're trying to gather evidence of things that happened, you would want to probably add some context to this as well. It's very helpful to help you see changes in behavior and frequency of occurrences. It can be done unobtrusively, but it doesn't tell you what was happening at the time the event occurred. And infrequently occurring behaviors are difficult to document. And usually this is limited to one child or no more than 3 behaviors at a time. Now you're going to give an example of something you can capture with a frequency count, a checklist, or a participation chart, and explain why this is a good way to capture the data. All right, here's your chance. Write down one final takeaway you're going to take from this.